The dock came alive with morning sound. Gulls screamed over the harbor, their wings flashing white against a sky washed pale by the rising sun. The slap of water against wooden pilings kept time with the hum of idle engines. Men in crisp uniforms strolled toward the gate, coffee cups in hand, voices carrying the casual edge of youth. Henry Cole moved more slowly, his shoulders steady under the weight of a mechanic's jacket. The jacket was plain, worn smooth from years of grease and salt, but inside its lining rested a ship patch few bothered to notice. His boots knocked gently against the dock as he approached a man out of place among the sharper lines of sailors half his age. One of them spotted him, grinned, and leaned toward his friend. "Hey, check that out. Looks like he's wearing a thrift store knockoff." The other laughed, the sound loud enough to bounce across the dock. "Guess he pulled that out of a rag bin. Jacket like that won't buy you respect." Henry didn't flinch. He'd heard worse, and from men with more authority than these. His fingers brushed the inside hem of the jacket, touching the patch. Stitched there with quiet reverence. He said nothing, but his silence carried weight. Another sailor raised his cup and called out, "Old man, you even know what regulation looks like. That jacket's out of date before I was born." Henry turned slow and deliberate. His eyes were calm, voice measured. "It kept me warm through colder nights than you've known." The remark landed softer than the jeers, but it lingered. The young man scoffed. "Fabric don't mean much. Metals matter. You got any of those?" Henry's gaze shifted to the flagpole at the far end of the pier. The flag snapped in the morning breeze, its edges slightly worn yet unmistakably proud. For a moment, the dock noise faded into the rhythm of that cloth catching light. The laughter rolled again, smaller this time, uneven. One sailor pushed further, his voice pitched with mock certainty. "That rag means nothing now. Ships moved on. So did the Navy. Maybe you should too." Henry stayed still. He let the pause expand until the gulls filled it, their cries harsher than the jokes. His hand pressed the patch again. To him, it was more than fabric. It was memory promise, proof that service did not vanish with years. The young men shifted, uncertain why their laughter didn't sound as strong as before. He finally spoke, quiet as the tide. "Respect's not stitched to uniforms. It's in how you carry yourself." For the first time, none of them had a quick answer. One cleared his throat, pretending to sip his coffee. Another shuffled his stance boots, scuffing against the planks. The easy humor had begun to slip. Cliffhanger 90s. Henry's hand lingered on the hidden patch. He lifted his eyes toward the flag again, shoulders squared, gaze steady. The dock seemed divided, mocking voices on one side, silence thick with history on the other. The gulls wheeled and cried above their wings, catching light like signals only Henry understood. The bell over the door jingled as Henry Cole stepped inside. The diner smelled of bacon and biscuits, the same mix it had carried for decades. Ceiling fans turned slow, stirring warm air across the red vinyl booths. A few locals looked up, nodded politely, and went back to their eggs. Henry chose a booth near the window. He slipped off his mechanic's jacket, draping it across the back of the seat. The patch stitched on the inside caught the morning light, faded, but still bold enough to be noticed. For a moment he rested his hand against it before sliding into the booth. At the counter, two sailors in crisp uniforms watched him. They spoke just loud enough for their words to carry. "Still wearing that relic," one muttered. The other smirked. "Bet it came from a flea market." "Doesn't mean a thing." Henry stirred his coffee spoon, clinking against porcelain. He let the words pass. Quiet, he had learned, often weighed more than argument. The sailors pressed on, voices rising above the hum of the fans. Young men earn stripes. He clings to scraps. Respect's not in patches. It's in fresh deeds. The waitress' apron dusted with flour came over with the pot. She smiled at Henry, though her eyes flicked toward the counter. "Refill, Mr. Cole." He met her gaze and nodded. "Appreciate it, Marie." As she poured, her voice carried further than she pretended. "Funny thing about patches. Usually means someone already earned what you're still chasing." The sailors shifted, their laughter thinning. One tapped his spoon too hard, the sound sharp against his mug. The jukebox clicked, alive, gears grinding before spilling a syrupy 90s pop ballad into the room. Its sugary beat felt strange in a diner built on country twang and old standards. One sailor chuckled. "Even the jukebox says he's out of date." The other added, "Not gonna lie, this place needs a better playlist." Henry lifted his head, voice even. "Songs don't lose meaning just because time moves on. Same with service." The words landed like a stone in a still pond. For a breath only, the music played. Marie set down the pot and leaned on the counter. She shook her head with a smile that softened the edge. "Guess jackets don't shine like medals, huh?" she teased, gently glancing back at Henry. Henry let the corner of his mouth turn upward. "Guess they don't need to." Coins rattled into the tip jar, sharp against the quiet. The sailors looked away, suddenly fascinated by their mugs. Cliffhanger 90s. The jukebox hummed on syrupy notes floating above the silence. Henry sipped his coffee, calm as stone. The patch on his chair glowed faintly in the morning sun, a quiet proof resting in plain sight. The post office smelled faintly of paper and dust, the kind of scent that never left a building with decades of letters stacked against its walls. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, their faint buzz mingling with the shuffle of shoes on linoleum. Henry Cole stepped inside with his usual slow patience. He tipped his cap politely at the clerk and walked toward the bulletin board near the entrance. His jacket, patched and faded, hung easy across his shoulders. On the board, pinned among garage sale flyers and church announcements, was a photograph that made him pause. The picture showed his jacket's patch, crooked, faded in the edges, but unmistakable. Someone had tacked it up with a handwritten note beneath old relics still wandering the docks. "Jacket doesn't make a sailor." Henry's hand lifted, fingers brushing the edge of the paper. He didn't rip it down. He only looked at it, calm and steady, the way he had weathered harder storms. Two young sailors stood nearby, smirking as they watched him. "See, even the board knows that thing's outdated," one said. The other added, "Patch like that doesn't mean much anymore. Just cloth." Henry's voice was low, almost conversational. "Funny thing about cloth. Sometimes it carries more than thread." The clerk behind the counter looked uneasy but said nothing. The sailors laughed their amusement, bouncing off the glass doors. An older officer in pressed blues came in, glanced at the board, and gave a dismissive wave. "Outdated cloth," he said flatly. "Not worth the pin it's stuck with." Henry turned his head, gaze calm. "Respect doesn't go out of date." The officer smirked. "Respect that patch." "Come on, sir. Real respect comes with medals, not scraps." Henry's eyes fell briefly on the rows of old mail slots, some unused for years. He let silence settle long enough for the sound of a letter being stamped to echo in the quiet. His sigh carried more history than their words could touch. At the back of the room, a boy barely out of his teens watched the exchange. He was one of the same youths who had laughed at the dock. But now his posture was different, less sure. He studied Henry's calm response, the way he didn't defend with anger, only with steadiness. The boy asked hesitantly, What does it mean? That patch? Henry gave him a gentle look. It means promises kept, even when no one's looking. The boy's mouth opened as if to argue, but no words came. His eyes dropped to the floor. The sailors grew restless, shifting their weight. One muttered, "You'll never change what people think." Henry finally pulled a small slip of paper from his pocket, an old receipt. He pinned it beside the photograph with deliberate care. On it, in his handwriting, 3 words: "Service leaves marks." For a moment the room grew quiet. Only the click of the pin punctuated the air. The dock foreman entered just then, carrying a stack of forms. He spotted the photo, the scribbled note, and Henry standing beneath it. His voice carried across the room, rough but steady. "Tomorrow you'll see who salutes it." The sailors froze, uncertain whether to laugh or keep silent. The foreman's tone left little room for doubt. Cliffhanger 90s. Henry stepped back, eyes once more drifting to the photograph. He didn't take it down. He didn't need to. The patch had already spoken louder than the jokes. As he turned to leave, he paused at the shelf of unclaimed letters, sighed softly, then walked out into the sunlight. The dock was crowded again by afternoon. Sunlight glinted off the water, turning each ripple into a shimmer of silver. The American flag snapped high on its pole, its sound sharp as a drumbeat. The same sailors who had mocked Henry days before lounged near the gate, laughter rising and falling with the gulls. Henry Cole walked down the pier, jacket zipped just enough to hide the patch from immediate view. His steps were slow but steady, every footfall a reminder of weight carried quietly. He paused near the gatehouse where the board of orders had been posted earlier. Conversations hushed slightly when he appeared, though snickers still broke the silence. "Back again with that jacket," one sailor said. Another chimed in, "Guess he hasn't learned cloth doesn't earn salutes." Henry stood without answering. His eyes drifted toward the flag, the gulls, the restless water. He let the ridicule settle around him like fog. Then the sound of polished shoes struck the planks. An Admiral uniform, immaculate, approached the group with 2 aides at his side. His gaze swept the dock, sharp but tired, until it landed on Henry. The laughter cracked, fell awkwardly into silence. For a long beat, nothing moved. The gulls circled overhead. Even the breeze seemed to hesitate. Henry lifted his chin just slightly, his jacket shifting so the patch inside caught a blade of sunlight. The Admiral stopped. His eyes widened, his hand trembling. He was slammed by silence heavier than steel, the kind of silence that carries memory. Without a word, he drew himself to full height. His hand rose in crisp, deliberate motion. A salute, perfect, unwavering, and wet with the sheen of tears. The dock changed in an instant. Jokes evaporated. Sailors who had smirked now stood frozen, caught in the weight of what they had just witnessed. The hush deepened until only the gulls cried. The Admiral's voice cracked but carried. "That patch. I served under its banner. Men braver than words can describe stood behind it. This man, he carries all of them." Henry didn't bow or boast. He returned only the smallest nod. Eyes steady, silence still his shield. One of the sailors whispered, "All this time. It was real." The foreman stepped from the crowd, his boots heavy on the boards. His tone left no room for doubt. "Justice doesn't always shout. Sometimes it salutes." The young sailor who had taunted Henry most lowered his head, shame settling across his shoulders like a weight too heavy to shrug. His coffee cup shook in his hand until he set it down on the railing. Cliffhanger 90s. The gulls broke the stillness with one long cry. Henry stood, as he always had, quiet, unmoved by scorn or glory. The flag above rustled once, then settled. The dock, once noisy with laughter, was now hushed by the echo of a single salute. The church hall smelled of casserole and coffee, the kind of mix that clung to hymnals long after the songs ended. Folding chairs squeaked as neighbors settled in voices, weaving together in a low murmur. The choir had just finished rehearsal, their last notes still hanging in the rafters like incense. Henry Cole stood at the back, jacket folded over his arm. He hadn't meant to come for attention, only to listen. But stories had a way of traveling. By now, half the town had heard about the salute on the dock. The patch once mocked had become the subject of whispered retellings. At the front, Pastor Miller cleared his throat. "Before we dismiss, I think we owe thanks to Mr. Cole. That patch he carries isn't just cloth. It's service memory honor." Heads turned, nods rippled through the rows.
Chat some.
From the side table, Marie, the waitress, called out with a grin, "Guess the choir sings better when the food's free." Laughter rolled through the hall, light and neighborly. Henry let the corner of his mouth lift just enough to soften the moment. A young man from the dock shifted in his seat. His voice was careful. "I didn't understand before. Thought it was just an old jacket." But when the Admiral saluted, he trailed off, the shame plain in his face. Henry's answer was simple. Understanding comes slower than laughter, but it lasts longer. Plates clinked as neighbors began sharing dishes. Someone passed cornbread down the row, another offered stew. The choir director leaned in toward Henry. "You know, we'll tell this story again and again. Not to embarrass you, but to remind ourselves." Henry's reply was quiet. "Reminders keep standards alive. That's enough."
Chapter 1.
The hymn they had rehearsed still echoed faintly from the walls. Voices hummed snatches under their breath, words overlapping with the clatter of plates. Children chased each other between chairs until parents called them back. Through it all, the patch remained visible on Henry's jacket, now resting across the back of a chair like a guest in its own right. Marie raised her cup. "To respect however it shows up." The group murmured in agreement, their voices warm as the coffee they sipped. At the door, the dock foreman pinned a fresh clipping to the bulletin board. The headline read, "From mockery to salute, a town learns respect." Eyes gathered around it. Some nodded soberly, others smiled. The young sailor who once mocked Henry touched the paper gently, his voice low. "Guess that's one headline I can live with." Henry said nothing. He stood in the doorway, watching, letting the sound of dishes and hymn fragments fill the hall. His smile was faint, but sure, carved into the quiet like a seal. Cliffhanger 90s. The choir's last note faded completely, replaced by the scrape of chairs and the shuffle of neighbors carrying leftovers home. At the door, Henry lingered just a moment longer, breathing in the mingled scent of food and hymnals. The bulletin board headline glowed under the hall light, echoing louder than any sermon. The night had thinned into gray dawn when Henry Cole stepped onto his porch. The swing creaked under his weight, a slow rhythm against the hush of morning. Across the yard, the flagpole waited, its cloth stirring faintly, as if eager for the sun. He rested both hands on his jacket, the patch pressed gently against his palm. The street was empty, save for one figure walking with hesitant steps. It was the young sailor, the same boy whose laughter had once cut sharp on the dock. Today, his uniform was neat, his shoulders straighter, though his eyes carried both apology and hope. "Sir," the boy began quietly, "I wanted to say, I was wrong." Henry studied him for a moment, gaze steady but not harsh. "Understanding comes late, but it's never unwelcome." The boy drew closer, stopping just short of the porch steps. "That patch, everyone talks about it now. Not like they used to. I don't deserve to wear anything like that. Henry's hand tightened around the cloth. The swing creaked once more as he leaned forward. Maybe not yet. But respect isn't about deserving on day one. It's about proving little by little. He stood slow but steady and held the patch out. The fabric was faded threadbare at the edges, but its meaning was whole. The sailor's breath caught. You'd trust me with it. Henry nodded. Service doesn't end with me. It carries on. A thank you doesn't need noise. The boy took it carefully, as though it might tear with the wrong touch. His eyes shone not with pride, but with resolve. They walked together toward the flagpole as the horizon brightened. The gulls began their first calls of the day, wings catching light. At the base of the pole, the boy paused, patch in hand, and looked at Henry. Henry gave a small nod. Show respect where it belongs. The boy straightened, raised his hand in crisp motion. The salute was clean, practiced, and for the first time honest. The sun broke the edge of the water, then painting the dock in gold. The patch caught a blade of that light glowing brighter than its worn stitches should have allowed. Shorts, moment number 3. 90s. The boy held the salute at sunrise, the patch pressed to his chest. Henry closed his eyes and breathed steady silence, filling the space more fully than words could. The porch swing creaked once as the wind shifted. The flag lifted, snapping with fresh strength. Cliffhanger. Fade out. The horizon glowed wider, bleeding color into the sky. Henry turned back toward the porch. His steps measured his silence, carrying the weight of legacy. Behind him, the boy kept standing tall, patch in hand, salute unbroken, as the screen of morning light closed over them. The porch swing creaked gently, while dawn brushed the flag in pale gold, and Henry watched the boy stand straighter with the patch against his chest. Still, the hush around them carried more weight than applause, a silence that felt like a lamp glowing in a winter window, steady, small, and impossible to ignore. Then the townsfolk's retelling would carry forward from choir hall to bulletin board, proof that kindness and respect did not fade like cloth. They lasted stitched into memory. Quietly, as the sun rose higher, the headline gleamed on the board, and the replay of that salute whispered its echo. A thank you doesn't need noise.